The first time my granddaughter whispered, "Grandpa, they know about the secret," I felt the blood drain from my face. I thought that secret had been buried with my wife. But now, my son and his wife were holding it over me like a noose, demanding my house, or they would tell the world what Helen and I had hidden for decades. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. My name is Richard Hale. I am 78 years old, a retired contractor, a widower, and a grandfather of 3. I built houses for most of my life, but the one I cherished most was the home I made with my wife, Helen. We spent nearly 5 decades together inside its walls, filling it with the noise of family dinners, Christmas mornings, and the kind of love that quietly survives every storm. When Helen died last year, I thought grief would be my only burden. I thought my hardest days would be the quiet ones, when her chair sat empty at the breakfast table, when her humming no longer filled the kitchen as she kneaded dough, when the garden outside bloomed without her hands to tend it. For nearly 50 years, she had been my compass. We married in 1972, when I was just back from the service, young and restless, and she was the only one who could calm the storm inside me. Together, we built a life the old-fashioned way, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. We weren't rich, but we were steady. Helen had a laugh that made neighbors linger on the porch longer than they intended, and a way of smoothing over my temper when it threatened to flare. Our house was the kind where Sunday dinners stretched into late evenings, where the smell of roast chicken and fresh biscuits could be picked up from the street. People used to say we were the strong ones, the couple that didn't bend. But strength, I learned, is not always loud. Sometimes it's quiet sacrifice, hidden away so deep even your own children never suspected. It was in the early 1980s when that sacrifice came calling. Helen's younger sister, Margaret, arrived one night with rain still dripping from her coat, eyes wide and swollen from crying. She had always been the wild one of the family, bright, beautiful, and prone to falling for the wrong men. That night, she was carrying more than her broken heart. She was carrying a child, too. The world thinks Margaret disappeared that year. The police chalked it up to running away, another young woman lost to the big city. But the truth was far messier, far more dangerous. She begged us not to tell anyone, not their parents, not the authorities, not even the man who had left her with bruises on her arms and the baby in her womb. And Helen, with tears in her eyes, turned to me and said, "We can't let this child suffer for Margaret's mistakes." That was the night we made a decision that would alter every part of my life. When the boy was born, we put our names on the papers. To the world, he was our late-in-life surprise, a blessing after we thought we could have no more children. To everyone, including him, he was our son. Mark. I raised him like my own blood because in every way that mattered, he was. I taught him to ride a bike on the cracked sidewalk in front of our house, clapping as he wobbled past. I held him when he fell and scraped his knee. I watched him score his first touchdown, beam at his high school graduation, and later stumble into adulthood with the same pride and frustration I had once felt for myself. But through all those years, I carried the truth like a stone lodged in my chest. Not because I doubted my love for him, but because the truth could undo him. Could undo us all. So I locked it away. And then Helen was gone. I thought she'd taken the secret with her. But tucked away in her desk, beneath old tax papers and postcards, I found the blue folder I'd prayed would never resurface. Inside were the documents I had begged her to destroy decades ago, the original birth certificate, the adoption waiver, even a faded letter from Margaret herself. Helen must have known what I had always feared, that one day silence would not be enough. That one day, the truth would claw its way back. She left the folder like a message to me: if you're reading this, it's because you'll need it. And now, standing at the edge of the life I built, I finally understood what she meant. Everything started 2 months ago. Mark's wife Laura found the folder while helping me organize. Now she and Mark sit across from me at my kitchen table, the same table Helen and I had bought 40 years ago from a carpenter down the road. I can still picture her polishing it before every holiday, laying out the embroidered tablecloth her mother made. That table had once carried birthday cakes, Thanksgiving turkeys, and stacks of school projects. Tonight, it carried only betrayal. Their eyes glitter with something I recognize all too well: not desperation, not fear, but greed. "You've done well, Dad," Laura says smoothly, sliding the folder toward me like a weapon. She always had that polished tone, the kind that made strangers believe she was kind. But I know better. I've seen her dismiss waitresses, talk down to cashiers, and whisper poison into Mark's ear until he repeated her words as if they were his own. But this changes things. If people knew your precious reputation as the town's respectable businessman was built on a lie. She lets the words hang, savoring them. Like she's been waiting for this moment. Like she finally has the hammer to break me. Mark won't look at me. His eyes stay fixed on the coffee mug in front of him, his thumb running circles over the ceramic like he might rub a different truth out of it. I can see the boy he once was, 10 years old, tugging at my sleeve during a thunderstorm, whispering, "Don't let go, Dad." Now he sits here, silent, letting his wife speak for him. Laura leans forward, lowering her voice. "The simplest way is for you to sign the house over. Quietly. Then no one ever needs to know." I stare at her manicured hand resting on the folder. My blood runs cold, but beneath the coldness something hotter begins to rise, something I haven't felt in years. Rage, yes, but also sorrow. Not because Laura is blackmailing me. No, I expected as much from her. But because Mark sits there, my son, the boy I taught to cast a fishing line, the man I trusted to carry my name forward, and he lets her do it. He lets her twist the knife, knowing the blade cuts deeper because it is my own flesh holding it. I wonder if he even realizes the truth, that the folder in front of him doesn't just hold my secret. It holds his entire identity. And if he thinks he can use it to destroy me, then he's a fool. Because secrets like that are never one-sided. The kitchen felt smaller than it ever had, the air heavy, pressing against my chest. I let the silence stretch, let it grow uncomfortable, like a rope tightening around their necks. Neither of them could sit still. Laura's nails tapped the edge of the folder. Mark's coffee spoon clinked softly as he stirred a drink he had no intention of tasting. I wanted to speak, but not yet. Not with anger. Anger is loud, and loud makes people retreat. Silence, though, silence makes them talk. Finally, I cleared my throat and leaned back in my chair, folding my hands over my stomach like an old man settling into the evening. "And what exactly," I asked slowly, each word measured, "do you expect me to do with this revelation?" Laura's eyes sharpened. She thought she had me cornered. "I already told you," she said smoothly. "You sign the house over to us. It's practical, really. You can't keep up with it. The taxes, the repairs. Mark and I can manage all that." I kept my gaze fixed on her, not even glancing at my son. "Manage it," I repeated softly, like I was testing the word on my tongue. "That's all this is about. Management." Mark shifted, finally meeting my eyes, but only for a flicker. I saw something there, shame, maybe, but it drowned quickly under Laura's voice. "Think about it," she continued, leaning forward, her perfume sharp and cloying. You get peace of mind, no more responsibilities weighing you down, and we make sure unpleasant truths stay buried. Everyone wins. Everyone. I let the word echo. Or just the two of you. Her smile faltered for just a heartbeat, but she recovered. We're family, Richard. Of course it's for everyone. I studied her, then turned my gaze deliberately to Mark. My son. My boy. And is this what you want, Mark? To take your father's house in exchange for his silence? His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The silence that followed was colder than any storm I'd ever walked through. I sat there, letting them believe they had won, while inside me something old and unbroken stirred to life. That night, after they left, the house was too quiet. Their coffee cups still sat on the table, half drained, lipstick smeared on one rim. I didn't wash them. I wanted to see them there, like evidence left behind at a crime scene. I sat in my armchair, the one Helen used to call my throne, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. My pulse had slowed, but my mind was alive in a way it hadn't been for years. If they thought old age dulled a man's edge, they were about to learn differently. Laura. Even saying her name in my head tasted sour. I remembered the first time Mark brought her over, almost 15 years ago now. She smiled too wide, laughed too loudly, and spent half the evening scrolling her phone under the table. When Helen asked about her work, Laura went on about climbing the ladder at a real estate office, but her eyes never matched her words. They were always calculating. Measuring. She treated kindness like weakness. I remembered the Christmas when Helen gifted her a handmade quilt, weeks of stitching, her fingers raw from the needle. Laura had smiled politely, folded it neatly, and by New Year's I saw it listed on an online marketplace. She sold it for $80. Helen never said a word, but I caught her wiping her eyes in the laundry room. And then there were the little comments, always little, always sharp. The time she told me my stories about the war were too depressing for dinner conversation. The time she said my truck smelled like old men and rust when I offered her a ride. The way she always pushed Mark to ask for more, a loan here, a down payment there, always justified with, it's family, after all. And now, this. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and stared at the blue folder still resting on the table. My hands itched to tear it apart, burn every page in the fireplace. But no. Helen had kept it for a reason. She must have known the day would come when I would need the truth, not fear it. So I sat there, planning. Not in anger, not in haste. But with the slow, steady patience of a man who had built walls, laid foundations, and known the value of every brick. Justice, I decided, would not come in a shout. It would come in silence, in precision. They wanted the house. They wanted control. But by the time I was finished, they would realize they'd built their whole scheme on sand. The next morning, I called Mark. My voice was calm, almost casual, like the night before had been nothing more than a family discussion. Son, I said, about what you and Laura mentioned, maybe you're right. Maybe it is time I hand things over. There was a pause on the other end, then a breath of relief. I knew you'd see reason, Dad. His voice carried the faintest tremor, the kind people get when they think victory is in their grasp. I'll need a little time to get the paperwork in order, I replied. Why don't you and Laura stop by this weekend? We'll go over the details. He agreed eagerly, too eagerly, and I hung up with a small smile. They thought I was yielding. What I was really doing was laying bait. That Friday, I set the house just so, papers scattered across my desk, the folder placed neatly beside them, a few legal books pulled from the shelf to make it look like I was preparing to sign. Then I brewed a pot of coffee, left 2 mugs out, and excused myself to the garden, telling them I needed fresh air before we got started. I didn't go far. Through the cracked window by the kitchen sink, their voices reached me, muffled at first, then clearer as they moved closer to the table. Laura's tone was sharp, triumphant. "See? I told you he'd fold. Old men can't stand pressure. By next month we'll have the deed in our hands." Mark chuckled, the sound low, conspiratorial. "You're right. He's been soft for years. Mom was the only reason he kept it together this long. Without her, he's just waiting to be managed." Managed. I gripped the wooden post of the pergola until my knuckles whitened. Every word felt like a nail driven into my chest. Laura's voice again, smug as ever. "Once we've got the house, we'll rent it out, maybe even sell it. You and I deserve better than this old place. Let him move into some apartment by the highway." Mark laughed, and it wasn't forced, it was genuine, warm, the laugh he once saved for me when we watched ballgames together. "Exactly. He thinks we're looking out for him, but we're really looking out for us. About time he gave us something back." I stood frozen, the autumn wind rattling the leaves around me. For years, I had wondered if Laura's poison had twisted him, or if there was still a piece of the boy I raised inside him. But in that moment, listening to him laugh at my expense, I knew. There was no saving him. When I stepped back inside, they were seated at the table, their faces bright and expectant. I gave them the smallest of smiles, the kind that could be mistaken for weariness. "All right," I said softly, taking my seat. "Let's talk about how we'll do this." And as they leaned in eagerly, not realizing the trap had already closed around them, I thought of Helen's words, the ones she'd whispered to me the night she passed, "Take care of her." I intended to. But taking care of her now meant taking care of the legacy we built together, by making sure our son and his wife would never profit from their betrayal. I hunched forward at the table, letting my shoulders sag just enough, as though the weight of the years was bowing me down. Helen always used to say I carried myself too tall, even in old age, but tonight I wanted to look small. Weak. Harmless. I sighed and rubbed my temples. "I suppose you two know best. I can't keep up with things like I used to. All these repairs, the bills, it's all a bit much." My voice cracked just slightly, and Laura's eyes lit up like a gambler seeing the dice land in her favor. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as though she were already the new mistress of the house. "You won't regret this, Richard. Mark and I have been planning carefully. The market's hot right now. We can get at least 900,000 for this place, maybe more with the land. That money could set us up nicely." I blinked slowly, feigning confusion. "Set you up? What do you mean by that?" Laura's smile sharpened. "Investment opportunities, Dad. We've been looking at properties in Denver. Rental houses, maybe even a vacation spot. This place is wasted on you alone. But with our guidance, the money could work for the family instead of rotting in empty rooms." I turned my gaze to Mark, tilting my head like an old man trying to catch the sound. "And you, son? You agree with this?" He hesitated just a fraction too long. "It's for the best, Dad. You'd still have, well, something smaller. A condo, maybe. Closer to town. You wouldn't have to worry about mowing lawns or fixing roofs. A condo. My home of 50 years reduced to an inconvenience they'd sweep aside. I forced a tremor into my hand, setting it on the folder as if to steady myself. And what about the grandchildren? I asked softly. Where would they come to visit their grandpa if not here? Laura's laugh was quick, dismissive. They'll adapt. Kids don't care about old houses, Richard. They care about amusement parks and iPads. Don't romanticize things. Her words were meant to sting, and they did. But more than that, they revealed something else. She didn't just want the house. She wanted erasure. She wanted to wipe away Helen's garden, the photographs on the mantel, the echoes of Sunday dinners. I nodded slowly, letting the silence do its work. Then, with a tone of cautious surrender, I whispered, if I were to help with this, I'd need to understand more. You've thought through the details, haven't you? Laura couldn't resist. She never could. She launched into a monologue about flipping properties, about turning dead assets into streams of income, about how Mark's career had stalled and this money would give him the boost he needed. I let her talk, nodding every so often, pretending to grow weary and overwhelmed while in truth I was memorizing every word. They thought I was too old to understand the language of contracts and investments. But I spent 40 years building homes, writing bids, navigating banks and suppliers. Every sentence out of Laura's mouth was a confession. Every detail she bragged about was evidence. If the day came when my plan faltered, when their greed threatened to outweigh my preparations, I would have their own words ready to cut them down. I smiled faintly, playing my part. You're right, I said. Maybe it is time I hand things over. I just want to make sure, you'll look after the place, until the papers are settled. Laura grinned. Mark exhaled, shoulders relaxing. They thought the old man was beaten. But in truth, they had just given me everything I needed. The morning after our little agreement, I dressed in my best coat and hat, the ones Helen used to say made me look like a banker instead of a builder. I drove into town, the road still slick from last night's rain, and parked in front of the brick office where I'd signed every important document of my life, wills, deeds, loans. Inside, the smell of old wood polish and paper greeted me. Mr. Callahan, my lawyer of nearly 30 years, rose from behind his desk, his white hair now matching mine. Richard, he said warmly, what brings you in? I sat down and leaned forward, lowering my voice as though the walls might listen. I need to make sure my estate is protected. My children, Mark and his wife, are pressing me to transfer the house. His brow furrowed. Do you wish to? I shook my head slowly. No. But I want them to think I might. In the meantime, I need safeguards. If they get their hands on anything, I want the assets frozen until I say otherwise. Callahan steepled his fingers. That can be arranged. We'll create a living trust under your sole authority. Any attempted transfers without your approval will be blocked automatically. The bank will receive instructions not to release funds under duress, and the deed to the house can be placed in trust as well. You'll remain the trustee until your death. Good, I said. My voice was steady, calm. I want copies of everything. In plain language. And I want a sealed letter prepared. Should anything happen to me, it goes directly to the court, outlining what they tried to do. His eyes softened. Richard, are you certain you want to go this route? It could create conflict. I allowed myself a small smile. There's already conflict, Callahan. I just want to make sure I don't lose what Helen and I built. By noon, the documents were signed. A new trust established. The house, the retirement accounts, even the small savings Helen had tucked away, frozen from greedy hands unless I personally approved a change. That evening, I sat again at my kitchen table, the same one where they'd leaned over me like vultures. The blue folder lay to one side, Callahan's fresh documents to the other. My fingers brushed over the papers, and for the first time in weeks, the knot in my chest loosened. If they thought they were leading me into a corner, they were wrong. The walls were already built, the trap already sprung. And when the moment came, they'd find themselves reaching for a fortune that had already slipped through their fingers. They came back on Sunday, dressed as though for an occasion. Laura in her sharp blazer, Mark in a pressed shirt I'd never seen him wear outside of weddings. They carried no gifts, no warmth, only that same hungry anticipation I had seen in their eyes the last time. The papers were neatly arranged on the table when they walked in. Not the trust documents, of course, those were locked away in Callahan's office. No, these were decoys, bland, unsigned forms that looked official enough to satisfy their greed for the moment. I poured coffee, slow and steady, letting the silence weigh down the room. So, Laura said briskly, sliding into a chair. Are we ready to make this official? I sat opposite them, folding my hands, my face calm. Mark avoided my gaze, as he had before. That told me everything. You know, I said softly, I've been thinking about the past. About family. Laura's smile tightened. That's sweet, Richard, but let's stay focused. If you just sign these. I cut her off, my voice sharper now. Family isn't built on papers. It's built on truth. And the truth, Mark, is that you've been living a lie your entire life. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I pushed the blue folder across the table. He stared at it as though it were a snake poised to strike. Your mother's sister, Margaret, I said evenly. She didn't run away. She came to us. Pregnant. Broken. That baby was you, Mark. Not my son by blood. My nephew. And all these years, I carried that truth to protect you. His face drained of color. That's not possible. Laura leaned forward, her voice sharp. Don't listen to him. He's bluffing, trying to scare you. But the folder was already open, the faded birth certificate in plain view, Margaret's name where mine should have been. Mark's hands trembled as he traced the letters. His lips moved, forming words he couldn't bring himself to say. I leaned closer, my voice dropping to a razor's edge. So understand me now. You hold no claim to this house. No claim to my name. You are family by choice, not by right. And you chose betrayal. Silence thickened the room. Laura's eyes darted between us, calculating, but for once she found no purchase. Mark looked shattered, yet even in his shock I saw no regret, only panic that the ground he stood on had vanished. I stood slowly, steadying myself on the table. You wanted everything I built. But the truth is, none of it was ever yours to take. And now, it never will be. I left them sitting there, the folder wide open, the lies of decades unraveling before them. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not because the secret was free, but because Mark's silence, his laughter behind my back, had already sealed his fate. There was nothing left to save. Laura was the first to move. She snapped the folder shut, her voice tight and brittle. This doesn't change anything. You raised him. He's your son, legally or not. And everyone will see you as a selfish old man if you try to deny that. Mark didn't defend her. He sat in silence, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. For once, I saw no defiance in him, no hunger for control, only the hollow look of a man who realized he had gambled away the very ground beneath his feet. I told them both to leave. They did, though Laura hissed threats all the way to the door. I didn't answer her. By then, she had already lost. Word spread in whispers, as it always does in a small town. Not about Margaret or the secret, those papers stayed locked away where no one but me and Callahan would ever see them, but about the sudden shift in my will. Everything I owned, every brick and acre, was placed in trust for my grandchildren alone. Not Mark, not Laura. Just the little ones, whose laughter still echoed through my halls like Helen's ghost. Weeks passed. Mark hasn't called. Laura never will. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the driveway, half expecting the sound of his truck, the way it used to rumble in when he came home late from high school games. But the driveway stays empty. The house is quieter now, quieter than I like. But when I walk through the garden Helen loved, when I touch the quilt she sewed before Laura betrayed her memory, I feel a strange calm. I kept the secret for love. And in the end, I revealed it for love too, not of Mark, but of the family yet to come. The ones who might still learn what loyalty means. The world has taken much from me. But it did not take my resolve. And it did not take Helen's legacy. That much, at least, I protected.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.